Welcome to the Highest Health Podcast. Raise your health, elevate yourself, and enrich your life. Experience a world of health sovereignty. As you near your highest health, you near your most luminous self.
Because if we are abundantly honest with ourselves, and we cultivate the deepest relationship with ourselves, we can offer that to other people. And that makes like really rich, beautiful connections. And I think that's really what we need, is to be as connected authentically as possible in the highest light.
Welcome to the Highest Health Podcast. I am your host, Natasha DeSaro. In this episode, Zack Loewenstein, longevity coach and biohacker, shares his passion for optimizing the human body. We start off by discussing how we as humans evolved as outdoor beings and our relationship to light, the concept of magnetism, and we intertwine more health-enhancing gems throughout the conversation, such as living in alignment and fulfilling our mission in life. This episode then takes a dive into the mystical nature of life and the universe. We move into some really wonder-provoking topics that I personally found so fascinating. We get into Zack's personal anomalous experiences regarding mystical events surrounding arial phenomenon, and his interpretation of these events, and furthermore, what it means for the betterment of our collective whole. This opened us up to lots more in the conversation about our abilities as human beings to cultivate our extrasensory perception, aka ESP, and experience remote viewing, really cool abilities. I have to say, this conversation left me in wonder with a lot of expansive thoughts on what is reality and do we really understand the nature of reality. I'm so excited for you to tune in. Welcome, Zack, to the Highest Health Podcast. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you.
Of course, yeah, I'm excited to have you. I know that you are a longevity coach and you are passionate about the health sphere. And you also manage a biohacking studio. Could you just go ahead and give us a little introduction to yourself, how you got into this space and why you're passionate about it?
For sure, yeah. So I've been into health, honestly, just out of high school. I started lifting weights and I wanted to maximize the results of that. But then I noticed that if you research how to, be healthy online, there's a lot of trains of thought. And this was probably about 8 or 9 years ago. And this is like right at the inception point, really, of biohacking starting to trend. So I started to see, online forums. Some would say, eat 6 meals a day to gain muscle, and others would say eat 1 meal a day. And I found the whole longevity topic to be interesting to me. I think in part because my father passed away when I was 4. And he died from leukemia, and then his mother died in her 30s from a brain tumor. So I think like my mortality has always been like subconsciously in my awareness, So the whole longevity field interested me. And plus I was 18 or 19 at the time. So like, what's a better time to start than at that age? I also I still suffer from ADD. So like sometimes I could lack motivation, or I could be super motivated to do something that's not really relevant to my day. So I was on medication and I really wanted to discover other ways to manage that. So that's how I got into the whole world of nootropics and, time restricted eating and exercise for longevity, all that kind of stuff. So how I got involved with Biohack Studios was honestly through serendipity. Just meeting the right people that introduced me to the right people. Basically, the owner of the studio is also the CEO of ARX.
Hmm.
ARX is a piece of exercise equipment that uses a motor and a computer to match the force that you press, giving you the perfect rep, really giving you the best resistance training experience possible. And ARX is pretty well established in the health optimization space. So from just kind of being involved with that whole team, kind of opened the doors to so many other opportunities.
That's amazing. Yeah, I find so often that it's our personal experiences, and typically, like, it's usually both, like with loved ones and with ourselves.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's great. And can you just give our audience like your definition of what you think bio-optimizing or biohacking is?
Yeah, I think it is trying to learn as much as possible to control what happens in your body, whether that is through changing, your external environment like light, pollution, that kind of stuff, or changing your internal environment through gut, supplements, food, that kind of stuff. So yeah, just changing your environment both inside and out to elicit a desired outcome, whether that's increase energy, decrease stress, improve longevity, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. So you mentioned light there, and I know ancestrally we evolved to be what I would consider like light beings, both in the spiritual
Yeah.
sense as well as in the physiological sense.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
but I find more and more with a lot of people, especially more so like in modern society and mainstream, that we're becoming like an indoor species. Could you share with us your thoughts of our relationship with light and why it's so important for us and potentially how it affects our energy, our mitochondria?
Totally. Yeah, totally. Well, light is truly a foundational energy as well as nutrient for your body. Like at the if you were to distill it down, like your body knows what to do with light. It has been experiencing light for a millennia since life was incepted here on Earth, or came, however you want to define how life came to be. Light has always been there. So I totally agree. We are becoming an indoor species, and I think that is certainly aiding to the deterioration of our health. Light, when it comes to your mitochondria, like your mitochondria use certain spectrums of light to generate energy. So without light, you can't make adequate energy, which is why, if you do red light therapy, you feel energized from it. You really do. And same with infrared light. Infrared light has this like relaxing effect because it just penetrates deeply and it has this ability to let your body know that you're safe.
Hmm.
Like, you sometimes see cats or dogs, there's like a sliver of light coming through the blinds and they lay in it because it makes them feel safe. It makes them feel comforted. I don't know. And I feel the same way, especially when I'm in an infrared sauna. It's like just being hugged by the light is how it feels. Um, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, it totally does. And I love your the way you described it as feeling safe. Like I completely agree with that. Agree with that. I never thought like that's how I felt when I'm in the sun. But in retrospect, I'm like, that is such a good and accurate way to describe how I feel.
For sure, for sure. And I think there's a whole quantum element to sunlight in particular. Um, there's just something about being in direct sunlight in the middle of the day that charges your system beyond vitamin D.
Mm,
Like there's just something about it that I don't know, like it just like turns on certain genes. It just makes you feel so alive. Um, and I live here in Florida, so like we get a lot of light year round, and I take it for granted. I go up north to, New York. 3 days in, I'm like, dude, where, like, how do you guys live here? I don't understand this, I tip my hat to, my family and everyone that lives, outside of I guess, the Sunshine State. But man, light is absolutely one of the most important aspects of a optimized life and optimized health, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's so powerful. And I resonate with your sentiment because I'm here in California. And
Yeah,
anytime I leave, I'm just like, after like, it's usually quicker than 3 days. I'm like, man, I can't wait to be back.
I bet. Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. But I'm originally from New York, so I totally understand like the seasonal affected disorder.
For
Um,
sure. I mean,
yeah,
it's cloudy for one day here and I get depressed. Like, I couldn't imagine a whole season.
exactly. Couldn't agree more. So something that you mentioned was this concept of magnetism. Could you
hmm
share with us what magnetism is and how you can apply it to your life?
That's a great question. And I think ultimately, when it comes to magnetism, unless if there's new research, we really don't know exactly what it is. There's some sort of physical property to the universe that where there's like a transfer of electrons and ions, and basically we have evolved in a whole plethora of electromagnetic fields, whether that's from the earth, from space, from the sun, from our loved ones being in close proximity to animals. um, Magnetism, from my experience, is a very under discussed, I guess, element to life
Mm,
that I think is much more important than I think modern medicine tends to acknowledge. And I think the reason being is, until 40 years ago, you talked about magnetism, it's basically quackery. Like people making crazy claims that it does this, that it does that, cures cancer, whatever. And no evidence to support it. But now, I mean, starting like, in like the late 70s and 80s, like there is starting to become more evidence that it may actually be a very foundational, I guess, energy to biology in general. How I mean, a simple way for you to apply magnetism is just grounding. I
mm,
mean, if you go to the beach or you walk barefoot for 10 minutes or so, you feel good, you feel better, you feel your inflammation go down. But how I've been using magnetism is through devices like the amp coil and the biocharger and the pulse center PEMF table. I have noticed that when you experience a harmonic frequency through some sort of magnetic coil or Tesla coil, basically it's a specific sound wave that changes the electromagnetic field of said device. It
mm,
can do thousands of things throughout the system. And interestingly enough, it could even do things that are not in your physical system. What I mean by that is like it can affect the spiritual elements of life. And I'm the most skeptical person when it comes to this stuff. But I shit you not, you actually notice you really it changes your day. It changes your day. It makes you more I can't really even it's hard to put into words, like at least for those types of programs. It just makes you more sensitive, I
mm.
guess.
I think it
But
opens up
continue.
opportunities to higher ranges of frequencies and it allows like serendipitous things to happen.
It certainly can. Yeah, absolutely. And I noticed the more you use these devices, the more you do it, like the more you feel the changes happening.
Mm.
But I've had clients do the biocharger and they pass parasites from it.
Wow, dang.
I when I had COVID, this was before our studio was open. I was able to use the biocharger. It was actually my first time ever using the biocharger, and this is the first strand of COVID. Like it was a pretty brutal strand, and I was really sick. I was starting to feel better, so I went down to the studio to do the immune support, thinking, what the heck, it can't hurt, right? So I do it, and I didn't feel anything. So I'm like, whatever. I went home, started making food, and then I realized it was my first time smelling onions and garlic or anything in 3.5 weeks. And
Mm.
then I ate my food, and it was my first time tasting food. And I was elated. Like it was a month of not, having any sort of sensory experience when it comes to eating. So the next day I was thinking like, what was different about yesterday? I took the same supplements, did the same things. Then I realized like, wait, it was the biocharger.
Wow.
So I am a huge believer and proponent for magnetism. And I think specifically harmonic magnetism, because to get a specific frequency into the body, almost it creates like a harmonic, like harmony. If you
Mm,
take a C minor tuning fork and then bring another one next to it, both of them will sing.
mm.
Same goes with every system in your body. How they discovered the frequencies for your liver, I don't know. But I've experienced this stuff firsthand, like I have another story. Like there was a heavy metal detox program on the biocharger. So I thought naively, what the heck? Like let's do this. Proceeded to have crazy brain fog for the rest of the day. And like it actually released some stuff. And now I tell clients like, guys, take charcoal if you're gonna do this.
Yeah.
Don't take it lightly, even though you can't feel it happening, there's things happening.
Wow, that is insanely powerful. And for some reason, like that's not very spiritual, but like that gave me the chills when you were saying that. Like,
Wow.
yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, if you ever have the opportunity to use any of those devices, hopefully they're going to become cheaper over the next,
Mm.
10 years or so. I think they're such a good investment. I feel so much better since implementing using it frequently, and actually having it in my house. Like I'm just so elated, so happy.
That's really cool. So you own one?
Yeah, yeah. Recently invested in an amp coil and very, very happy with my purchase.
Cool. And then the one that you did the heavy metal detox and the one that made you pass parasites that was called
Mhm.
a biocharge.
Biocharger. Yeah, the biocharger. The amp coil can do that as well, and
Okay.
potentially even stronger, even deeper penetrating. So
Is it something that you put on your head or like
so the amp coil is like, I mean, I can even grab it. It's like basically a coil that you'd put on your stomach.
mm,
And the biocharger is a Tesla coil with
oh,
these different tubes around it. It's like a Tesla tower with these different tubes with different gases. They're called noble gases.
hmm,
And you can imagine like this Tesla coil is producing a big donut of electromagnetic energy. And these tubes are responding to that field of energy by producing flashes of light, like photons of light. And it's beautiful. It's almost like having an aurora borealis at your fingertips.
that's so
Um, it is really, really cool. And um, yeah, so basically with that thing, you just have to sit next to it. It's like a human Wi-Fi router. Like you're just
cool.
absorbing the energy.
It sounds like it sets a really nice ambiance too.
Yeah, definitely, definitely does.
Yeah. And I wonder if it mitigates any effects from like EMFs. It probably does.
I mean, I'm not sure because I know it is essentially an EMF generating machine. So it's like healthy
Different
EMF.
kinds. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So perhaps it might blunt the Wi-Fi and whatever around, but um, what I've heard from the company is basically 15 minutes in front of the biocharger is like a few hours out in nature. So
Wow.
yeah, like that great feeling when you go on a hike or come home from the beach, like you can get that from the biocharger.
Dang. That
Yeah,
is, yeah, that's really cool.
yeah. They're like $15,000 though, so they're a
Oh,
little expensive, but there's
yeah.
more and more places, offering this kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
um,
Very cool. I'll keep an eye out for it.
absolutely.
Cool. So, on to more of the esoteric kinds of conversations. I know you've had some wildly fascinating experiences with a ship over your home and lights coming down. Could you share with us your experience with this and your interpretation of this
Mm,
experience?
okay. Yeah, I've had handfuls of, I guess, anomalous experiences, probably starting from the age of 11, and it seemed to happen just about every year of my teenage years, something, but basically, I guess what you're talking about was this experience that I had with some friends. So basically, we were playing airsoft in the neighborhood, and I was going home. My friend lived about 8 houses down, and like basically imagine this. So like when it's sunset, it's like golden hour, and the clouds were moving really quickly, like they were low and moving quickly, like a storm was coming in. But there's like these beautiful pinks and orange hues in the clouds. And I'm like walking home and I see a light in the cloud. And then I notice two more lights in the cloud, and it was like a perfect equilateral triangle. And as I'm like walking home, I realized that there is black in between the lights. Like it was a ship in between the lights. And it wasn't like a stealth bomber like this. It was
Oh
like on its side, like a sail. And it was really low. It wasn't high up. This was 1,000 feet off the ground. And it was directly like right next to my house. Um, so I basically had a moment where I was first shocked, in awe, like have had no idea really how to respond to something that was seemingly impossible. And I had a choice. I could either take a picture or I can call my friends. Because I was just with them a minute earlier. So I decided to call my friends. I had a little LG chocolate. I was like in sixth grade at the time. I could have took a picture. It wouldn't have meant anything.
yeah.
So I'm on the phone and I'm screaming like, "There's a UFO! Look outside! Look towards my house! Look towards my house!" And I look back up, and the black from the ship was the same color as the sky. Like it went from black to invisible. Like I didn't see it happen. It was just it like fucked with my mind. I'm allowed to cuss, right? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
that's
Yeah,
great.
yeah. It like fucked with my mind. I'm like it just was like very weird. Like I had no reference point to what I saw. Um, and they're like running up. I'm on the phone, like, look, keep looking, keep looking. And as I'm like talking, either the lights converged into one light or they turned off and there was a light in the middle. I'm not sure which it
Mm,
was, but there was just one ball of light when a second earlier there was three,
dang.
and it's stationary. And I see it like coming in and out of view from the clouds, like it's just staying in one spot. And by this time, my friends are seeing what I'm seeing. I couldn't tell you the color. It must have been like a whitish blue light.
Mm.
And then in the second, it was like shot from a gun, just gone, just boom, gone. And we are just sitting there, kind of like just jumping up and down, like, that was so cool. Oh my God. And then we hear a roar from the distance, and there's two FA-18s super low, just screaming towards us.
Wow.
And they literally broke formation right over our heads. It was like something straight from a movie. Um, and I think from my, I really don't know what I saw, but I am led to believe what I saw may have not been extraterrestrial,
Mm.
but perhaps a black budget program where they were maybe testing the response time to MacDill Air Force Base, which is right in Tampa.
Mm.
Um, After quite a bit of research, there is speculation slash conspiracy theories online that we have something called the TR3B, which is identical to what I saw. Like literally the exact thing I saw, like perfect black equilateral triangle, no um, writing, basically three lights and a one light in the middle, and it also has the ability to go invisible. So like yeah, and so I'm starting to think perhaps there might be like a secret base in the middle of Florida, and they're testing these things, or because I used to always see military convoys going like past my house into the middle of nowhere. So that's kind of like what I lean towards. But regardless, it was a once in a lifetime experience. And regarding the lights in my room, it wasn't actually my room. It was the friend that actually called just for that whole incident.
Oh,
This
okay.
is my first weird experience I've ever had in my life. So he lives out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, like if you're driving in the middle of Florida, you drive an hour deeper into Florida. Like there's nothing around there. He had 10 acres, or his dad had 10 acres. I was 11 years old at the time. and there's an electric fence around his property, and it was a gated property. We're talking. It's 3:30 in the morning. We're talking about girls or whatever, and the power goes out. Don't think anything of it. We just heard the fan turn off, the TV turned off. We just kept talking, right? We weren't really watching TV. And earlier in the night, his window, he had a window, there's like a tree outside of his window. But there's like a film over it, so it's like you can't see in, you can't really see out, just for like security. I thought I saw flashlights or just lights earlier in the night, but I didn't think anything of it. Assumed it was like a neighbor or whatever. Um, anyway, the power goes out. I don't think anything of it. And in the blink of an eye, there's just a bluish white light just beaming into his window. Like this was it was like daytime, like that. And there was no focal point of light. The entire room, it was like a nuclear bomb was going off outside or something. Like, like daytime. And it was a blue light. It was so weird. And I kept seeing shadows moving on the wall. Like you can tell the light was moving, like almost like when a car drives by, how you see that.
I have the chills again.
And I go out, I'm like, I look at him, I'm like, what the heck? And I like fearlessly just go look out the window, and I just can't see anything. And this might be a fallacy of memory. Like I could have swore I also saw that flashlight looking thing, or something looking like with a flashlight outside. I look back at my friend and he's crying, so scared. And then I realized, like, oh shit, like this isn't normal. Like, because like he lives there, and anyway, I go back to him and we're kind of like, dude, like what the heck's going on? Blah blah blah. And it must have been 2 minutes later. It just quickly as it came, it was gone. And we sat there for 10 minutes not knowing what to do. And we were like really scared. Like it was really scary. It was not normal. So then we army crawled into his dad's room, woke him up, told him what happened, and he's like, "Are you guys like pranking me right now?" He saw how scared we were.
Wow.
Handed him an AR-15. He's like, and he had one, and he's like, "Zach, stay inside." And they just went and cleared the property, and there was no one opened the gate. There was no signs of anyone being there. And then he took the truck and he put it right to the window and turned the high beams on. And like you can see the focal point of light. Like it was clearly a truck in front of the window. This was nothing like that. It was really, it was a different kind of light. I can't really describe it. And turns out, I think it was like 3 or 4 years later, he had another UFO sighting, and that blue light beamed on him. And he also, my friend saw him like 5 or 10 minutes later, and he was white as a ghost. He was like out of breath because he rode his bike so quickly away from it. Just weird stuff, weird stuff. I mean, Central Florida has a lot of activity. It really does. We would see orange orbs over the house. The whole family would see them. It was like the
Wow.
size of an oak tree, just a ball of orange light, just like floating. That was the first thing in the sky that I've actually ever seen. And I had seen that 4 times since.
Wow.
Yeah, or three times since. But I think like the last time I saw it, this was so weird. It was like four lights like this, and it looked like balls of fire.
Hmm.
And the first thought is flares. Then they all turn off, and then three show up somewhere else. They turn off, four show up somewhere else. They turn off, and it was like they were like dimension hopping, is what it kind of like. That's what it kind of looked like. Weird, weird stuff. Weird stuff.
Yeah, damn. That is so wild. It gave me tons of chills.
Yeah.
So like the most recent time that you've seen this sort of like, weird stuff happening with lights and whatnot, you've had these experiences, your friends have had them. Like, what is going through your mind? Like, are you still fearful, or are you like, do you have other emotions? Or are you just fascinated?
It feels honestly like a gift. It's how it feels. It's like because I've seen probably 6 or 7 anomalous experiences, and I always feel like I don't need to take a picture of this. Like, but you have these experiences, and like you think to reach to your phone to film it, but then I don't know. It's almost like, no, like this is for you. Who cares if other people believe you? You know what I mean? Um, am I fearful? So I'm not fearful, no, but the more I research it and the more time you spend thinking about it, the more you realize like there's a genuine reason for the secrecy. And I think ultimately the truth is very scary. And I don't think people are actually ready for it, at least in this current state of mass formation psychosis, where we think that like going to work, buying designer clothes, and like keeping up with the Kardashians, that's life. Like that is literally such a distraction from what life actually is. Um, and some of the things that like I've like researched from very credible people and heard from very credible people, um, I'm not fearful, but there are things to be fearful of. Like
Mm,
I think that this is just another element of nature, and I think it's our birthright to understand the nature of reality.
mm,
And I disagree with the notion that government understands everything and that they've potentially successfully, have this 0 point energy and all these different technologies that they're just keeping it secrets. Like I don't necessarily buy into that. Although I did at one point.
mm,
I think the secrecy is very well warranted. Um, I think it all boils down to the fact that we actually don't understand the nature of reality. We don't understand what space is. We don't actually even understand what life means, what it means to be alive, and what death means. Um, it's like I've said this before, but this is like a biblical event happening right now over our heads. And like if you look at history, like we don't treat messiahs very well when they're in human form, or in our current time era. Like I
right.
think these others, I think they have always been here, and I think that there is a fundamental um there's a fundamental what's the word, like overarching theme to all these experiences, and it has to do with consciousness, the human soul, fertility, DNA. It has to do with the environment and earth. Like a lot of abductees say the same things. And you can discount a couple of them, but you can't discount hundreds of thousands of people. you know
Mm,
um I don't think like I've ever had an experience quite like that, where I've been like abducted, but the scariest dreams have always been like abduction type dreams. I think they were dreams though, like I think about this stuff. Like I don't think I have left my body and like, or left my house rather, but perhaps there is another element to reality that we are not accepting of as a culture, that is non-physical, that we all get glimpses of when we have dreams. Um, I'm sure you've gotten information about waking reality in dreams that isn't possible.
yeah.
I certainly have. Um, and I've had like this, I guess, isn't necessarily relevant, but I've had like reoccurring entities visit me in my dreams through since childhood. But I don't think it's like a physical thing. I think there's a dimension to reality that is just simply, we don't have a language for it. And they've tried to talk about it in the Bible, and the um, Bhagavad Gita, and the Mayans, and like all these different cultures. They're saying very similar stuff. And
Yeah.
if you really just not look at it literally, or not look at it metaphorically and look at it literally, they're saying that Earth has been visited. Humanity has been seeded with knowledge. We come from the breath of the gods, with the blood of God. Um, there's just some like really interesting reoccurring motifs that occur no matter what culture you look at, from the Americas, Central, South, and North America, to Asia, to the Middle East, to Northern Europe. They all say the same thing. And that said, they all also talk about angels and demons. And I
Mm,
think that that's kind of what we're dealing with here.
hmm,
I th I think, and I think that's pretty scary. the truth of the matter. If I don't think the average person's ready to accept that,
Mm.
that perhaps that stuff is very real and always has been real. I think it kind of takes away the power of science in some ways too, because there's things that science can't account for as of right now, and I don't think people are ready to accept that as reality. But they need to because it is. You know what I mean? They really do. Um, yeah, and I do think that we're living in perhaps the most important generation ever because we're like essentially a part of the generation that will become a member of this intergalactic community and like where it's going to be accepted. This conversation 10 years from now is going to be insanely different. And
Mm.
I think over the next 5 years, we're going to learn a lot more. Especially like I feel like they're not just going to tell us. You kind of have to do your own research credibly. Like you have to follow people that have worked within the intelligence communities, the Department of Defense, Stanford, Harvard. Like there are people working on this stuff that are talking about it. I don't think people realize that on Fox News, they've had representatives that have worked within the intelligence community say that gray aliens have visited Earth. Like, I don't think people realize that it has been said on Fox News.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, because it's not like it's not a, there, for some reason, it's not viral. But there is language in the 2023 defense bill that essentially provides amnesty for people who want to come forward to Congress that have worked in these black budget programs, which we've heard rumored about since like the 80s, like Bob Lazar, like working on flying saucers.
Mm.
Um, if those programs are real, which I believe they are, Congress is going to learn a lot more about them next year and the following year. So um, there's a domino effect that's going to occur over the next couple of years. And as I'm sure you know, like disclosure has happened. Like
Mm.
the government has acknowledged that there are things that they can't account for flying over our airspace. Um, what I don't think they are quick to acknowledge is how much they actually know. I don't think they know everything, but I mean, let's be real. They've been studying this since the 30s, like on the low. And yeah, with me saying that, it's not China or Russia. I'm sure they have their own stuff, but this stuff was seen during World War II and before World War II. Like, that's not China. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We didn't even have rockets when these things were originally seen. So, um, there's a lot of different theories that I think are credible, and I don't think it's one thing. I mean, they say it could be future humans warning us about a nuclear Armageddon.
Hmm.
I think a scary theory is perhaps it's some sort of race or species that is from the future that knows that potentially there's like a nuclear holocaust about to happen and they want to study the climate before. And that's like a really scary theory.
Yeah.
But there's also like, I think one of the more likely ones is that we are not sharing, that we're not the supreme species on this earth. I think that perhaps we've coexisted on Earth with some other intelligent life form that maybe lives underwater or lives in Antarctica. Or I think the underwater thing has a lot more weight than people realize. Um, these things are always seen around the water, or very often seen around the water. And yeah, there is one general dude who was quoted. A person asked him, he was like, "Hey, like, are there any movies that like, the government is kind of like dripping some truth?" And he kind of laughed it off. He's like, "No, there's not. But The Abyss, that's
Huh.
a good movie." That's
Wow.
all he said. And he like winked, and it was like interesting that he said that. I don't know if you've seen The Abyss, but the whole idea is like there's there's a super intelligent, benevolent species that live in the abyss.
Hmm.
Really fantastic movie. It's a
I
really
don't
good
think I've
movie.
seen that. I'm gonna
Yeah,
watch
it's a yeah, it's a very good one. It's worth renting.
it. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I kind of get lost in tangents when it comes to the
No,
subject.
I loved all of that. And then on your note of the abyss, in my research, I've have read that there are sites that are like technically black holes where just so many things just disappear, and people just don't know what happened to them, and there's far more of them than we imagine, and a lot of them do seem to be in water. uh,
Hmm.
I did want to ask you about the dreams. Like, are some of your dreams, does this occur where like you're falling asleep and like you feel like you're entering into a black hole? Or
Yeah, like, well, I've had those, I think everyone has, where you're falling asleep and you shake it feels like you're falling. The scariest nightmare, dream, whatever that I've ever had by far, um, actually was an alien abduction dream. I was just falling asleep, and in my dream, I was like being beamed down by a gravity beam and
mm,
like cemented to my bed, and I could only move my eyeballs, and it felt like the person in the floor below me was being abducted, and I was being felt like I felt the power of like the beam. And then like it started morphing into like honestly like a DMT like experience where reality was starting to flip outside of itself, and it was profoundly terrifying. And I was like in this dream, and I stand up in my like I actually physically stand up, and I start turning on all of the lights in my house and start slapping myself, and I was shaking so hard. I was like, I was like tremoring, and my girlfriend Leah was like really scared. She like thought like something was off, and she's like, "Do you want me to sage the house?" And I'm like, "No, like I don't want anything around me." Like she was like, she like comforted me and like tried to make me feel better, but I'd never woken up tremoring from the fear. Like it was like the craziest panic attack I've ever had asleep. Um, but it was weird. Like I literally had to slap myself awake. It was just so scary. Um, and I don't know what it is. Like on the surface level, like yeah, I guess it makes sense. Like it is scary, but I don't know. Like it just I don't understand why it's that scary. You know what I mean? But it really was, and thankfully I haven't had any sort of dream like that. But um, man, it was so vivid too. It's like I remember every last bit of it. Remember,
yeah.
like I'm laying down there, I'm like looking at the blinds, and they're like folding. It was I can only describe it as like a dimethyltryptamine type of experience where I don't know if you've ever, you don't have to answer that, but like,
I've never
it
done
was,
DMT, but I've done
yeah,
mushrooms.
yeah, yeah. DMT like really takes you outside of reality,
Mm,
and that's exactly how this felt. Like it was like reality was folding outside of
yeah.
itself. And it feels like when you're outside of reality, there's no coming back, is like that sensation, you
Well,
know?
that's why
So
it's scary.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Dang. Yeesh.
But thankfully, most of my experiences are nothing short than angelic. Like I rarely have these are, I guess, parts of my shadow, I guess, that come forward in dreams potentially, but for the most part, I have very angelic, mystical experiences if I do have a mystical experience, whether that's in a float tank or doing breath work or on psychedelics.
Hmm.
It's never demonic typically. It's very much the opposite for the most part. So um, I do think I feel like there's a lot of people when it comes to psychedelics or with like this whole conversation about a non-human intelligence, people over talk about the good parts. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And like I like to create balance with like the perspectives. Um, when it comes to this non-human intelligence, there's a whole group of people saying like, no, it's the government that's the bad guys. It's humanity's I guess desire to always be at war. That's the thing that needs to be avoided, and I agree with that. But I also think that those people that are saying that like ETs are just space brothers and they're here to help us, I think it's naive. I
Hmm.
think the truth is we don't know.
Right, right.
And I don't think they're here to hurt us. I don't. I think they would have done that 80 years ago when we had our first nuclear detonation. But if you look at ancient stories of the gods,
Mm.
all of them talk about a war between gods. If you another another thing I heard from an intelligence guy that has worked in this kind of study, basically he was saying, if you want to learn about ancient man, research Greek mythology. Now, in Greek mythology, for example, there's a story of Prometheus. Prometheus was the god that gave humans fire, gave us light at night, gave us basically knowledge.
Mm.
And the other gods did not want humanity to have fire, did not want us to have knowledge. So they banished Prometheus to the top of a mountain for his liver to be eaten by an eagle every day.
Mm.
Um, if so, if you look at that, it's just a story. But if you look at it literally, what is it saying? That a group or a person or a species gave us knowledge, and the others banished that person, group, or species. And there's also talks of gods being at war with each other. So I do think, like, when I say gods, I'm talking about some sort of non-human
Mm.
intelligence. Um, I think that's also something that needs to be, thought about as well. Like, we just don't know. We're really children in this whole conversation, and
Yeah.
there's a lot to learn.
No, I love that concept, and it reminds me of the the statement that you made about creating balance and the gods being at war with each other. And it reminds me of the concept of yin and yang, how there's good and bad in everything.
Yeah.
Um, and you're totally right. It is biblical in nature. And like when you were describing your friend's experience with the lights coming through, that's always in movies. And
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. It's like there's these images that we have that are like, they've always just been like repeating images in media
mhm,
or within the collective consciousness of like that blue light that I saw. Like, you watch, I think it's Arrival. There's a lot, Encounters of the Third Kind. Like, there's a blue white light.
mhm,
What is that? Why is it always reoccurring? And then, the grays, the little guys with the big heads and the big eyes. Um, I do believe that in the next probably year, maybe up to 3 years, I do think that we will have an image, probably not confirmed by the Pentagon, but some image or video circulating, because there's two really good documentaries for anyone interested in learning about this. The first being The Phenomenon. It came out during 2020. It was supposed to like be in the movie theaters, but then COVID happened. It was
wow.
really well made documentary. The next one's called The Moment of Contact,
Okay.
and that one talks about a case down in Brazil, and a being was seen, and this being reeked of sulfur or ammonia, had red eyes. It looked like a devil, a guy, like
Wow.
literally stereotypical kind of devil, like short thing with like scaly head. And that's another thing. If you research religion, they always talk about the smell of sulfur when there's a
Mm.
demon in. But anyway, apparently there's a video, a 35-second video of that creature alive, filmed by military people. If you watch that documentary, there's no way it didn't happen. Like, that's a very well documented case. It's like a known fact down in that city in Brazil.
Wow.
But yeah, that video exists, and it's being talked about online, and apparently it's been taken out of Brazil. So
Wow.
they're just waiting for the right time or the right place to release it, because that's going to be the mic drop, honestly. you know
It sounds like it.
yeah, people that have seen it said it didn't look like a person and it didn't look like an animal. It was like something in its own category.
Wow. Dang. So, from your perspective, do you two questions, I guess, and they kind of go hand in hand, but do you think that people who have had these experiences have an evolution or a heightening of consciousness or sensory? And and then what do you think this idea that there's other entities and beings out there that we don't know what they are? What do you think its implication is for the health of us as a society and just the bigger picture of our planet and ultimately like our consciousness, like where we're headed
Yeah,
towards.
those are great questions. So the first question, you know, there's a Stanford researcher, his name's Gary Nolan, and he is definitively proven that people that have had contact experiences, people that have been within close proximity to a claimed UFO or whatever, have abnormalities within a certain region of the brain that is also consistent with people that have heightened levels of ESP and psychic phenomenon like remote viewing. So perhaps that there is, just from being a witness to one of these things, perhaps there is a increase in perception. I certainly believe that to be the case. If you see a flying saucer or something in the sky, like, I feel like you have to wonder what else is out there and what else is possible. I mean, I don't, I think me personally, I I don't think necessarily that those experiences induced my spiritual awareness, but I do know that they've influenced it.
Mm,
And I think that there's some sort of genetic aspect of spirituality that seems to be clear, that like some people are very much prone to mystical experiences if they drink ayahuasca or take mushrooms,
mm,
and other people are literally like, they're just very much grounded in the physical reality, and it's very like unnatural for them to break out of that. So um yeah, I think that there is some sort of element to it that could perhaps be a locking key for consciousness. And the implications of it, I don't think, like, even I, who have thought about this more than a lot of people, like, I don't think we even can understand the magnitude of the implications of it. um because what it boils down to is, um we don't know who we are. We really
mm,
don't know who we are. And I tend to believe that perhaps what is coming to Earth, or at least some of what's coming to Earth, could be our long lost parents,
mm,
intergalactic parents. And
mm.
maybe that's why they don't wipe us out, because like we're their children, so to
Right,
speak,
right.
metaphorically. Um, but also the implications um, can also be negative too. Like, have you heard of Skinwalker Ranch or anything that's happened there?
Um, I don't think so. I
Yeah,
don't.
so there's this ranch in Utah, and for generations, for at least a few hundred years, it has been known to be a paranormal hotspot. We're
Mm,
talking poltergeist phenomenon with like disembodied voices, footsteps inside, doors opening and closing, cow mutilations, UFO sightings, radiation burns, radiation that has actually killed people, or don't quote me on that, but has seriously injured people and have led to deaths. I wouldn't say that it killed them on the spot, but just really crazy anomalies have happened there, to the point where the U.S. military or the Department of Defense bought that land, I believe in the 90s, to study this stuff. And in that 2017 New York Times article about UFOs, basically they're talking that $22 million they were saying went to this program, went to Skinwalker Ranch.
ah,
Um, but they talk about a phenomenon where people that go there have a hitchhiker effect, where they bring something home with them, where it attaches to them and then starts affecting their family and their children and then their neighbors and then their friends, like
wow.
a virus of some sort. But it gets kind of creepy because, like, we're not talking about like, just shadows in the house, or like, you think you see someone. We're talking about people, like, you look outside and there's a person with a dog head just standing there looking at you. And
Wow.
this actually was a PhD guy, and his wife saw this and she didn't say anything. She thought she was maybe having a psychotic episode. And then her children saw it the next day.
Damn.
And that's like pretty scary shit, you
That
know?
is scary.
We're talking about seeing orbs in your room, like blue orbs, where if they pass through you, you get cancer within the year. Like that has happened too. And these are like documented, verified things that have actually happened. Um, so, there's a reason for the secrecy, in my opinion. I really do. I do. I think that. But I also know that there's a benevolent aspect to this. It's balanced. Like you were just saying, it's yin and yang. Yeah, I don't think it's all scary. I just think it's all misunderstood. And yeah, I don't know. Like I used to really think that I guess I was more naive. Like I used to really think that they were really just coming to Earth to protect us from us and nuclear weapons. And I do think that's like likely one of the motivations. But the more I learn about it, the more I like really can acknowledge that I don't know actually what's happening and that no framework or model makes sense. Like
Mm,
it doesn't encompass everything. And
right.
that's so exciting to me. Like really, being a student to the universe,
So true.
it's kind of like ayahuasca, like people often have very dark experiences, but other people have extremely angelic light experiences. So I think it's no different, and perhaps we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, you
Totally.
know,
I mean, we are all one in the same.
yeah,
I feel like we're just like one little percentage off from being like you can be super angelic, but you're like one percentage off from like completely falling into your shadow self.
totally, yeah, totally, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure, for sure. We live in a very hedonistic, shadow society. We do, and it's our duty to bring light to our lives and to lead by example. It really is our responsibility to do that for our loved ones. Um, yeah, no, I think that was a really good question. The implications. It's going to change our relationship with ourselves. It's going to change our relationship to life itself. And just like Christianity did, and just like
Mm,
Hinduism did. Like, there's a really good book called The American Cosmic,
mm,
and it was written by a woman who was a professor of religious studies, and she was learning about all these miracles that have happened in Catholicism, and she started noticing like they really sound like modern UFO
mm,
like events. And then she basically proposed a hypothesis that us as a society, we worship technology. Like science is our God.
mm,
And what represents the absolute top of the pyramid of science and technology? The flying saucer.
mm.
Something that has the ability to basically create magic and we can't understand it. And she hypothesizes that this is going to be the next religion, the next like big fundamental shift in human consciousness. um I tend to like acknowledge that to be a potential possibility, because yeah, it is of that order of magnitude. It really is. I just hope that it is, everything's done for the benefit of humanity and for the expansion of consciousness and not for the control. um because that seems to be a reoccurring theme in ancient stories, is when man gets too powerful, God knocks him down,
Right.
whether that's a great flood or uh, whatever. Like, and that's another thing, like the flood. How come every continent has a story of a flood that happened to the ancients? Like, it's kind of interesting. Was this one flood? Was this a bunch of floods? Like,
Right.
um, yeah,
So I had a couple of things surface that I wanted to comment. So do you think reincarnation has any interplay with all of this?
yeah, I do. I definitely do. I think from like a quantum physics perspective, it makes the most sense. But I also like, I don't know, like I think it's like my inner scientist grappling with my inner mystic. Like I don't necessarily like know what a soul is and whether that can be reincarnated. But consciousness, I believe, could be reincarnated. And I don't think they're necessarily the same thing. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah.
Um, I think potentially like my unique expression, like this is the only experience of this, but consciousness will spontaneously, like I'll have another experience. And what makes me so confident in this is before we're born, we're nothing, right? Like it's like you're not sad that you missed the dinosaurs. You just didn't exist. You were nothing. And now you're in reality. Now you're something. And when you die, you return to that same nothing. If you can pop into existence once, why can't you do it again?
Yeah.
Right? Like if I think it's not even like I think it's probable. I don't even think like it's up for question. I think it's more likely than not that there's another experience to be had. I just don't necessarily understand how it plays in with the UFO topic.
Mhm.
I've heard people talk about perhaps some of what is visiting us may be AI in nature, like technological in nature, but it has consciousness but no soul. And perhaps it is studying us
Mhm.
because it's trying to understand like what a soul is or what biological life actually is in conscious form. There just seems to be a reoccurring theme with DNA and consciousness in general. A lot of people that have abduction experiences become spiritual after that, or
Mhm.
um, I guess maybe need to become spiritual after that to just to cope with the magnitude of what they experienced. Um, yeah, but I don't know how it interplays, but I feel like it does.
Yeah. For some reason,
Yeah.
that just kept resurfacing when you were talking, like reincarnation just kept resurfacing. Um,
Yeah.
I'm curious with your research with the people who have had abduction experiences. What happens? Like, were they falling into a dream, or was it more so lights coming into their room?
That's a good question. There seems to be a consistent experience, but there isn't necessarily a consistent experience. Like some people get abducted when they're awake in the middle of the day. Like
Mm.
that's happened. Um, but it tends to happen at night, which tends to make me think perhaps at least a certain portion of it is likely sleep paralysis because I've had sleep paralysis. I was just talking about my perceived experience of sleep paralysis, but and again, we don't really know what dreams are. So yeah, I guess the stereotypical abduction experience is you are awoken in your night, you can't move, there's people around your bed, little people. Before you know it, you're in a white room on a table, and there's these either tall or short men with large heads and big eyes and no nose and a slit for a mouth that are working on you. Um, and I've had one dream like that back when I was like, late teenager years, probably 18 or 19 years old.
Wow.
It felt like a dream. Like, I'm not saying I don't think I got abducted. I really don't. But in my dream, I was in a white room and on a table, and there's two white looking gray guys looking over me, and one touched my third eye, and I fell back through a tunnel and I woke up. And that's like was my dream. And I thought it was a pretty cool dream. It wasn't threatening, but there all have been experiences with people being taken when they're wide awake with their family. Their family is seeing stuff.
Wow.
This guy Whitley Strieber, he wrote a book called Communion. Communion was made into a movie,
Mm.
but you know his story is very unbelievable. Like it's very difficult to believe. But he has medical records to show that he has had trauma, internal organ trauma from like objects and stuff that like were not possible. His family has had experiences. He's had scars. Haven't gotten super deep into the book, but there are doctors that have found implanted devices. In
Yeah.
fact, on YouTube right now, Patient 17 is a documentary about a
Mm.
doctor that has pulled out devices out of people that have radio signatures coming off of it. Some of them are the size of like a hair, and have every element, I have like 30 elements in like one tiny little sample, like things that don't really occur normally. So yeah, I don't really understand what it is, but I want to understand it. I think what this represents potentially is a theory of everything, like
Mhm.
like ancient man, quantum physics, spirituality, science. Like this could answer a lot of those questions. But I don't think we're meant to know the answers necessarily.
Yeah, I think in our current state of consciousness and state of physical being, we don't have the sensory perception to actually understand all of it. Like we're not designed to understand all of it. Like we can have like little glimpses and understand parts, I think.
Mhm.
But not the whole thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think it's really important for people to practice meditation and like remote viewing and cultivating or developing their extrasensory perception because it is not woo like at all.
Mm.
The CIA put millions of dollars for over 25 years, and they're likely still doing it right now, into remote viewing.
I've
And
never heard
the
that term before.
Okay, so remote viewing is the ability for one to go into meditation and to
Ah,
effectively leave their body and retrieve information from physical reality and bring it back.
okay.
Um, and some people are exceptionally gifted at this. I have met people that have worked within the Monroe Institute who have friends that are operational, meaning people that work for police and government, that
Mhm.
like you go into meditation and you can go into a file cabinet in the Kremlin and read papers. um, Sounds like Star Trek or Star Wars, but like every single person listening or watching this has that ability.
Yeah.
And there's this series of documents called the Gateway Experience, and this was released in 2003. And this was the CIA's remote viewing training program. And it is a series of meditations. And you do the first meditation, and it's like, whoa, like there's something here. And by the time you reach like the seventh or eighth meditation, um, I've had sustained visualizations outside of my body. So like when you meditate, thoughts tend to come in, right? And like it's like hard to stay focused. You stay focused on your breath. But doing these meditations, I was able to maintain a visualization of um it was like I was in New York and it's like I'm not getting distracted one bit. I'm so deep into my unconscious or subconscious mind that I'm like sustaining this visualization with no other thoughts coming in. And I feel like some people are much more gifted than others at that. And when you develop this kind of stuff, that's when really interesting things start to happen. You talk to anyone that is into remote viewing, um, like really into remote viewing, like you can make contact with others that may not have your best interests in mind.
Mm.
Just to be blunt with it. And I was talking to this guy. He was like a SpaceX engineer, expert remote viewer, and he said one of his operational friends had an experience that like absolutely scared him to his core when he was deep into that plane of consciousness, and that really made him realize that we don't understand reality, and it's something that should be not taken, should be taken very seriously. It should not be taken lightly at all. um, I don't want to scare anyone away, so I'm not going to really share what that was, but I do think that there is value in developing your psychic abilities.
Hmm.
um, and I don't want to use psychic as like a woo term. I'm just meaning like ESP. uh,
Right, right.
yeah, like when you meditate a lot, like you have serendipitous events happen to you, like you're in alignment. And the more, I guess the more your subconscious and conscious mind are in sync, that's when miracles really happen. When you're like living your truth and like really embodying like your true essence.
I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so give me a moment.
Yeah, no, please, please.
Um, oh. Did you mention the name of that program, the meditation program from the CIA?
Yeah, it's called the Gateway Experience, or like
Okay.
the Hemi experience, or the Hemi wave. And it's really cool. I think there must be like 30 meditations on there or something around
Mhm.
there. And then there's all of the documents associated with the program, including like things about consciousness. This is back in the 80s, talking about how consciousness is a hologram that could be transverse,
Hmm.
and talking about like the pineal gland and like mystical experiences, entities. Like this is straight from the CIA.
Wow.
It's just like amazes me how this stuff is out there, but people are not like picking up on that, you know?
Right, right.
Kind of blows my mind. It really does. Like this
Yeah,
year, like I was saying on Tucker Carlson, Gary Nolan was talking about gray aliens, like coming, like he was on Tucker as a person who has worked in this field, and like it's just amazing that people are not paying attention.
right.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, our society is so designed for us to be distracted and sucked into the matrix. So,
yeah,
and like if you haven't had like a mystical experience or someone to mentor you, or I'm not really sure what it is per se, like it's
hmm,
really easy to get sucked in. Um,
totally,
and not, and sometimes it's an easier way of living because you don't have to decide for yourself. You don't have to, like, things are just done for you.
yeah, yeah,
Just
no, for
follow
sure,
protocol. So I can totally understand like why more people haven't come into, I guess, their super abilities, honestly.
yeah, yeah, for sure, and perhaps there's some sort of deliberate suppression, because the truth is if everyone was self-actualized and like
Mhm.
living their absolute highest purpose, there would be a lot of conflicting interests if that were to happen. And I don't I tend to be less conspiratorial now than I've ever have been, but I do think that perhaps we're not supposed to all be, living our highest truth. Perhaps like, like this is the nature of reality, and there's really nothing we can do about it. But I don't want to believe that. Like I would like to try to raise the tide of all ships.
Right, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's always a new tide to reach to. But I do agree with that in a sense because part of me believes that to be true. Because, like, if we all were self-actualized, I don't think we would actually be here. Like, I think it's part of some people's journey to not, be privy to this stuff and just sort of live a different, you know, below their potential, I would say. Um,
Yeah.
because that's part of the journey. And, maybe the next time they'll be on a higher journey.
For sure. No, for sure. Yeah, like um I totally agree with that. Sometimes like, you know, it feels like sometimes you have earned your stripes, so to speak, when it comes to the blessings that have come into your life or into your incarnation. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like the fact that we're alive right now in, the 21st century, and we're talking on the internet,
Yeah,
and I think those are like really special things that most humans throughout history would have dreamed of, the
right.
fact that we're in air conditioning right
Yeah,
now. Um, but beyond that, like I do think that the wheel of karma is a very interesting topic to look into. And think you're right. I think we're all here to learn certain lessons to help us develop and unite, right? Like
absolutely.
um and if we all learned the lessons all at once, uh I think it doesn't sound natural, it
Yeah.
doesn't, something about it doesn't sound natural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious when you've had these remote viewing sessions, have you had do you experience like physiological changes within yourself? Like, do you ever have like perhaps like tears come over you? Not necessarily like like sad tears. They could be happy tears too. But do you feel a physiological difference in your body?
Great question. I have only had less than a handful of those experiences, probably like four or five. Even though I've practiced it dozens and dozens of times. Um, from a physical perspective, I definitely achieve theta and potentially gamma brainwave states. So when I come out of it, I feel extremely relaxed and clear and almost like I had like a hypnotic session is what it feels like. It feels almost like hypnotism. But I haven't had any sort of emotional experience. I haven't really had any like like spontaneous laughter or crying. Like I haven't had any sort of purging of energy like that. Um, but definitely had brain changes for sure. Just, you're just tapped into your inner sensitivity when you meditate that deeply, and it changes the course of your day and even the next day a little bit. Um, Floating is one thing. So being in a sensory deprivation tank, that likely from the magnesium, but also just from the stimulus itself, like that does have lasting effects. That'll change. Like if you do it on Wednesday, you'll feel it even going into Friday, like it just
Nice.
resets your energy. And I did one last week and I came out of it and I looked in the mirror and I felt like it was 2016. I felt like I reversed like 7 years of age. I was like, whoa, I feel
That's
so
incredible.
good. Yeah, like the bags under my eyes were gone. My skin was like tighter. I don't know. It was so cool. And I'm like, why don't more people do this? Like this felt amazing. And I've had really interesting experiences in the float tank. Like likely it's just like your brain trying to make sense of the pure blackness. But yeah, like lights in the float tank and like you see
Mm,
like kind of like orb looking things, but it's your brain playing tricks on you,
mm.
really, yeah, that stuff's really cool. I want to start doing that more frequently for sure.
I've got to try one of those. Have yet to do one.
Yeah, they're so cool. Highly, highly, highly recommend it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you do it, do 3 sessions within the month. Like, do
Yeah.
because the first one you just don't really know what to do. You don't. It's hard to relax and unwind.
Hmm.
The second one, you start to get a hang of it, and then the third one, you can just tap in. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Really
yeah,
cool.
definitely.
The other question I wanted to ask you was because I find this with myself with my meditation practice is I kind of need to counter it with some sort of like grounding practice because I think you can also, if you don't counter it, or for some people at least, you can kind of lose yourself in
Oh
that
my God, yeah.
space.
Yep.
And I
We
felt
all have, yeah, we all have friends like that. You
right.
know? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, grounding's imperative. I mean, even I think like even in remote viewing, there's certain techniques to stay grounded.
Mm,
But yeah, I think, that's where having crystals like
mhm,
shungite and orgone and, what's the other one? Anyway, but like having like really dense carbon-based crystals
mm,
I find does, help you stay grounded energetically. And I've always, being pretty skeptical, like science minded, like I've always been open to the idea of, crystals having unique properties that can affect physiology. And it wasn't until I got an aura ring and now a whoop where I've been able to actually test it. If you
mm,
go to sleep and you put labradorite under your pillow, my
mm.
REM sleep doubles every single time I do that.
Yeah.
And it's very vivid dreams. And I have literally I've shown my average of REM sleep for a week, and then I start with labradorite. And within one night, it's just double. Like I'm going from an hour and a half of REM to 3 hours, two
Yeah.
and a half, 2 hours and 45. Like it's like I've literally tested this.
That's really
So yeah, I do after having those types of experiences, like there is something to it for sure. And I think especially with meditation, like, we are not meant to just be in this spiritual mindset at all times. Like we're supposed to be fulfilling our mission and helping others reduce suffering. And we can't do that if we are exploring the cosmos through
yeah.
consciousness. Like we definitely need to be in reality and make an impact in other people's lives and help them achieve more peace and less suffering, you know? So, um, yeah, I think a good way to ground besides going grounding or having crystals is just living your day-to-day life, you know, and saving these conversations for the right times or the right people or, you know, like, but yeah, just living your life, you know?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Beautifully said. Couldn't have said it better. Um, so yeah, I feel like throughout this conversation, I was just thinking like how this, like our potential just for spiritually is just so much bigger than I think we could even fathom.
Yeah.
Um, and with that said, I wanted to ask you, what does it mean for you to live at your highest potential, your highest health? Um,
Hmm.
yeah.
What does it mean? That's a really difficult question. Well, I think on a physical level, like biohacking or health optimization, like I want to experience what it is like for my DNA to express in the highest form possible. Like I want to know what that feels like. I don't want to be on my deathbed wishing I did, you know, whatever when I was younger. Like I want to actually do that. So I live as fully as possible. Um, but on the highest level, on a non-physical, I guess, framework, I think what it means is to be extraordinarily honest with yourself.
Mm.
And when you learn something uncomfortable or difficult, you act on that information, even if it's not the easy decision. And you lead by example, helping others do the same. Because if we are abundantly honest with ourselves, um, and we cultivate the deepest relationship with ourselves, we can offer that to other people. And that makes like really rich, beautiful connections. And I think that's really what we need is to be as connected authentically as possible in the highest light.
Amazing. The image
Yeah.
that came to my mind was a ripple effect. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. A wave.
Right, right.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Yeah.
Great
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, great stuff, you know. Life's hard, but it's worth it. It's worth it for
Absolutely.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. If it was easy, it wouldn't be as fulfilling and sweet, you know?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And yeah, and I also like that said, like if it was forever, it wouldn't be as sweet and fulfilling. Like there's some beauty in I guess the pain of our mortality, right? So um think about that sometimes. I was thinking about that earlier today. I'm like, wow, like I think what makes life so special is that it's temporary, you know, and that we're not always gonna have our parents around or have our best friend around.
Exactly.
Like then we need to really enjoy it, you know, like
Right.
that's really important.
Completely agree. Well, hey, it's been such a chill, provoking conversation. So much fun.
Yeah. Yeah,
Really,
it's been a good time. I
yeah.
hope I wasn't too like doom and gloom about this whole non-human intelligence topic.
Not at all.
But I think it's more like we just need more information, you know, and I would like to make this transition into being, I guess, a interplanetary species because like that's happening in our lifetime. By the time we're in our 80s or 90s, like we will likely be having colonies on Mars at that point,
Mm,
you know. So that said, if we're going out to the stars, we need to be in our highest expression possible and not militarizing our relationship with others,
mm,
especially others that have likely millions of years advanced. So I think that's like one of my dharma. That's like part of my dharma is to just help the transition period um, and like reduce ignorance about the topic too, you know, and be like, let's be real about it, you know. Um, Yeah,
Yeah.
I go on riffs. I tend to go on riffs when thinking about this stuff.
No, it makes for a great podcast.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
Well, it just it leaves me with so much wonder. Like we have so much to explore, and like the fact that you're mentioning colonizing Mars, I'm just like picturing like my grandfather pioneering from Italy to America, but us like pioneering from Earth to Mars.
Yeah, no, seriously,
Yeah,
seriously. And I think like it's gonna happen, but I think we got to get our shit together. Like we really do, spiritually. Like um the I think all religion is fluff. The truth, the only thing we need to focus on is do to others as you'd want done to yourself. If you can learn that, we're good. Like
yeah,
across the board, we're good. And that is the highest truth to actualize, and it's one of the most difficult ones for sure.
that's amazing.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
really
Nothing else matters except for that. Really.
sums it all up beautifully.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to share, Zach?
If anyone wants to follow me, I'm most active on Instagram, Biohack Zack, spelled Zack. And I tend to, keep followers up to date about different things happening within the UFO community. But I also talk a lot about technologies that are here to pioneer our health and pioneer the future of medicine and fitness. So definitely, if you want to get in touch, shoot me a follow.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Zach, for coming on. Really
Thank you
appreciate
for having me. Yeah, this was fun. Let's do it again when I
it.
get
Yeah,
better equipment.
no, I would love to. It'll be fun. And I'll do a little more research and I'll be like, I gotta ask Zach about this.
Yeah, let's have a part two for sure.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Well,
Cool.
thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I'll catch you on the other side.
Sounds good.
Thank you for listening to Highest Health. If you gained value from today's episode, leave a review, share with a friend, or post on social media. If you're interested in achieving your highest health or already pursuing it, send me a DM. I'd love to hear from you.